Welcome to Griffonomics.
It's great to be back.
I was driving in this morning and I passed a construction crew working on a power line. It was, the typical scene. Orange cones, these huge bucket trucks, guys in hard hats wrestling with this just tangle of wires. And it really struck me. I had this thought. That looks like the most old school job in the world.
Old school? How so?
Well, think about it. We're living in this age of AI. Quantum computing is on the horizon. We have autonomous vehicles. And yet the fundamental way we move electricity around, it looks pretty much the same as it did in 1950.
Sure, from the outside.
It feels low tech. It feels like, just basic maintenance.
And that right there is probably the single most dangerous misconception in the entire market right now.
Dangerous. That feels a bit dramatic for a deep dive on a construction stuff.
Oh, it isn't dramatic at all if you follow the money. Because that old school crew you saw this morning, they aren't just fixing a wire. They are, in a very real sense, building the plumbing for the single biggest economic shift of our lifetime.
Okay, you have my attention.
We're looking at a company today that has completely, and I mean completely, reinvented what it means to be a contractor. We are talking about Quanta Services. The ticker is PWR Quanta.
Okay, so for anyone who's not familiar, and frankly for me, because I still just see the bucket trucks, who are they, really?
Historically, your perception is spot on. If you knew Quanta 5 or, 10 years ago, you thought of them as the storm chasers.
Right, the emergency crew.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hurricane hits Florida, it knocks out the grid, and Quanta sends this army of linemen down there to get the lights back on. They were a specialty contractor, basically labor for hire.
So you pay them to dig a ditch, put a pole in the ground, string a wire, and then they leave.
That was the old model, precisely. But the mission today for this deep dive is to completely dismantle that perception. Because if you look at the source material we have, and we've got the earnings reports from late 2025, the strategic partnership announcements with massive utilities like AEP and NiSource Quanta has undergone a metamorphosis.
A metamorphosis.
They are not just a contractor anymore. They have methodically become a vertically integrated total solutions provider.
Total solutions. That sounds a little bit like corporate bingo. Everyone says they provide solutions. What does that actually mean in the context of, moving electrons?
It's a fair question. It means they are no longer just the people who bring the power to the building. That was the old job. Now, they are the people who build the complex systems inside the building that consume that power.
Okay, so they're going inside the walls.
And in a twist that we really, really need to dig into later, they are starting to actually manufacture the critical components of the grid itself.
Hang on. The construction company is becoming a factory owner.
In a very strategic way, yes. And that is why we're framing this whole discussion around what we're calling the electron economy.
The electron economy. I like that. Unpack it for me.
Well, think about the macro picture. Just zoom out for a second. We aren't just talking about turning on a light switch anymore. We are talking about the fundamental electrification of everything.
Transportation, heating.
Transportation's going electric. Heating is going electric. Heavy industry is reshoring back to the U.S., and guess what? It's going electric. And then, sitting right on top of all of that, you have the absolute tsunami of the AI boom.
The data centers.
The data centers.
Oh, yeah.
These facilities are consuming electricity at a rate we have literally never seen in human history. We are not talking about megawatts anymore. We are talking about entire gigawatts of demand appearing seemingly overnight in places like Ohio and Indiana.
Yeah, there's a problem there.
There's a massive problem. You can have the smartest, most powerful AI chip from NVIDIA, and you can have the most advanced software from OpenAI or Google, but if you cannot physically move the electron from the power plant to that chip, none of it works. It's just a very expensive rock.
The grid is the bottleneck.
The grid is the absolute #1 hard and fast bottleneck.
Okay.
And Quanta has spent the last decade positioning itself as the gatekeeper of that bottleneck.
So if I'm hearing you right, the thesis for this deep dive is that Quanta has evolved from being the repair crew you call after a storm to being the architect and the master builder of this entire energy transition.
That is the thesis, exactly.
Yeah.
They have moved from a service company, which is cyclical and has lower margins, to an infrastructure platform, which has predictable long-term revenue.
And how are we going to prove that out today?
We're going to look at 3 very specific things from our sources. First, we're going to dig into their generation to consumption strategy, and specifically how they're getting inside these massive data centers with the key acquisition they made, a company called Dynamic Systems.
Okay, inside the walls.
Second, We're going to use a massive new project with a utility called NiSource as a case study. It's a masterclass in how to take on enormous projects while managing risk.
Risk management, got it.
And third, we'll look at that vertical integration piece, the partnership with AEP, American Electric Power, where they are literally addressing the global supply chain crisis head-on by making the parts themselves.
And we have to talk about the numbers, because I took a look at the 2025 financials, and they are...
Well, they're staggering.
They're record-breaking. We will absolutely get to the $44 billion backlog and the workforce of nearly 70,000 people. But let's start at the beginning. The transformation. The shift from old Quanta to new Quanta.
Let's do it. So, historically, Quanta is this 800-pound gorilla of the electric grid. When I look at the revenue segmentation from their reports, electric power is still the giant in the room, right?
It is, absolutely. It accounts for roughly 80% of their revenue. And you have to understand, that base business is incredibly robust on its own. We're talking about the design, construction, and ongoing maintenance of high-voltage transmission lines, local distribution networks, and massive grid modernization programs.
So if a big utility, say in California, needs a massive new 345 kilovolt line running across 3 states to connect a new solar farm they call Quanta. They are one of maybe 2 or 3 firms in North America that can handle a project of that scale and complexity. That's their bread and butter. It's a great business. But it's not the growth story.
So where does the story pivot?
The story pivots around a strategic inflection point that the company calls generation to consumption.
Generation to consumption. It sounds simple, but I have a feeling there's a lot of nuance packed into that phrase.
There is. Historically, as we said, a utility contractor stops at the substation. They bring the high-voltage power to the facility, they hook it up to the meter on the outside of the building, and they wave goodbye. That business is what we'd call generation to meter.
Okay, makes sense.
The new Quanta strategy says, no, we are not stopping there. We're going beyond the meter. They are crossing the threshold and going inside the facility.
And so they're doing the wiring inside the building, like a standard commercial electrician would.
It is so much more than just wiring. And this is where we have to talk about their other business segment, the one called Underground Utility and Infrastructure Solutions.
Right.
Now, on paper, that sounds like they're just laying natural gas pipelines or digging trenches for fiber optic cables, and they do that. But that segment has evolved. It now houses what the sources call their elite mechanical and plumbing capabilities.
Plumbing. We're in a high-tech data center discussion, and you're bringing up plumbing.
Plumbing is everything in a modern data center.
Walk me through that. Why does a building full of computers need elite plumbing?
It all comes down to heat. Immense, overwhelming heat. When you stack thousands upon thousands of these high-powered AI chips together in racks, they generate an amount of heat that is just... It's hard to comprehend.
A giant furnace, basically.
A giant furnace. And if you don't actively and constantly cool them down, they melt, they fail, the whole system crashes. So the cooling system, the network of chillers, the massive piping, the sophisticated liquid cooling loops that run right up to the chip is just as critical, if not more so, than the electricity itself.
So Quanta isn't just bringing the power to the front door anymore. They're also building the entire circulatory system inside the building that keeps the electronic brain alive.
That is a perfect analogy. And this brings us directly to the acquisition of Dynamic Systems, or DSI. This is a massive strategic deal. Quanta bought them for about $1.35 billion.
DSI. And what's their specialty?
DSI is based in Austin, Texas, and they are absolute leaders in what we call mission-critical facilities.
Mission critical, that's a term that usually means if this breaks, people die or somebody loses billions of dollars.
That's exactly what it means. We're talking semiconductor fabs, where even a speck of dust can ruin millions of dollars in chips. We're talking advanced healthcare facilities. And specifically, their sweet spot is hyperscale data centers.
Okay, so this was a targeted purchase to get inside the data center.
It was the key that unlocked the door. By acquiring DSI, Quanta now has the ability to self-perform up to 60% of the entire mechanical, electrical, and plumbing scope, what the industry calls the MEP scope inside the data center.
Wow, 60%. That's a huge jump in their addressable market for every single project.
It effectively doubles their bite at the apple. Think about it. Instead of just fighting for the transmission line contract outside, which is a competitive business, they are now bidding on and winning the highly complex, higher margin internal work. They own the power path and the cooling path.
And the numbers back that up. The sources mention that DSI added about 1.8 billion in multi-year backlog almost immediately after the acquisition.
Immediately. And for the full year 2026, DSI alone is expected to generate between 1.25 billion and 1.45 billion in revenue. It was a home run.
That's a huge return on their investment already.
But I want to zoom in on a specific technical detail that the sources highlight, because it really explains why Quanta had to buy a company like DSI. It's not just about getting bigger, it's about the changing physics of the data center itself.
The physics.
Yes. We are seeing a fundamental shift in the electrical architecture. Traditionally, data centers ran on lower voltage systems. Maybe you'd see a 54-volt power system running to the server racks. It was pretty standard stuff.
Okay, 54 volts.
But the new generation of AI chips, and here we're specifically talking about the NVIDIA Blackwell architecture, they are so incredibly power dense that 54 volts just doesn't cut it anymore. It's inefficient. You'd need copper cables as thick as your leg to move that much current at such a low voltage. The energy loss would be huge.
So the solution is to up the voltage.
Drastically. The entire industry is rapidly moving toward 800-volt DC power systems that go right to the chip.
800 volts inside a server room. That sounds genuinely dangerous.
It is industrial scale power. It's incredibly dangerous if not handled properly. You cannot just hire a standard commercial electrician to install an 800-volt DC busway system. The risk of an arc flash is lethal. The insulation requirements are completely different. The precision required for the installation is exponentially higher.
Ah, I see. So your average Bob's Electric isn't getting the contract to build a hyperscale AI plant.
Bob's Electric isn't even allowed in the parking lot.
Uh-huh.
This technical shift to 800-volt architecture creates a massive, massive competitive moat.
It's a barrier to entry.
A huge one.
Yeah.
By acquiring DSI and combining it with their existing best-in-class electrical expertise from companies they bought earlier, like Cupertino Electric and Tri-City Quanta, is effectively saying to the market, we are one of the very few entities on Earth that is certified and capable of engineering and installing this high-voltage architecture inside the building.
So they've really cornered the market on complexity.
Precisely. And the growth numbers reflect that reality. This specific segment, which they now call Technology and Load Centers, is projected to grow 60 to 80% in 2026.
60 to 80% growth. For a business that's even adjacent to construction, that's unheard of. That's tech startup growth.
It speaks to the sheer demand shock that's hitting the system. The hyperscalers, and you know who they are, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, Google, they're in a flat-out arms race. They need these facilities built yesterday.
And they can't afford mistakes?
They cannot.
Yeah.
A failure in an 800-volt system isn't just a blown fuse, it's catastrophic. It could take the whole facility down for weeks. So they're willing to pay a significant premium for execution certainty.
Execution certainty, that phrase keeps popping up in the research notes.
It is the product Quanta is actually selling. They aren't selling wire and pipe, they are selling the guarantee that the project will get done on time, on budget, and correctly.
Okay, so they are inside the walls now with DSI. That's the consumption side of the equation. But let's step back outside, because there is a project mentioned in the notes that I think perfectly illustrates the generation side of things.
The NiSource mega project.
Yes.
This thing is a beast. And we absolutely need to spend some time here because it is a masterclass in business strategy and risk management.
So set the stage for us. What is the scope of this project?
It is a 3-gigawatt power generation project. Its sole purpose is to power a new data center campus being built in Indiana. The client is the utility, NiSource, Inc.
And the timeline.
Execution is slated to start in 2026, with revenue really ramping up in 2027 and 2028, and full completion is scheduled for 2032. It's a long-duration project.
I just want to pause to contextualize 3 gigawatts. That is an enormous amount of power. That's roughly the output of 3 standard nuclear reactor units, all for one data center campus.
It gives you a sense of the scale of AI's power consumption. It's truly staggering. But what makes this project so interesting from an investor's point of view isn't just the size, it's the structure of the deal.
Right. The notes say Quanta formed a joint venture, a 50-50 split with another company called Zachary Group. Why split the pie on such a huge project? Why not just take the whole thing themselves?
Because Quanta knows what it doesn't know. And this brings us to what's known in the heavy construction industry as the widowmaker.
The widowmaker?
The firm fixed-price contract.
Okay, you have to break this down for me. Why is fixed price a widowmaker?
Okay, imagine you hire a contractor to build a custom home. You both sign a contract that says, I, the homeowner, will pay you $500,000, period. no matter what happens.
Sounds great for me. I have total cost certainty. I know exactly what I'm paying.
It's fantastic for you, but for the contractor, it's a massive gamble.
Oh.
What happens if the price of lumber triples next month because of a tariff? What if they start digging the foundation and hit a layer of solid granite they didn't expect? What if it rains for 6 weeks straight and they can't get any work done?
The contractor has to eat all those costs.
They eat every single penny. And if the costs go over that $500,000 limit, they're literally paying out of their own pocket to finish your house. Now, just scale that logic up to a multi-billion-dollar, highly complex power plant that involves combined cycle gas turbines, or CCGTs.
Which are essentially jet engines bolted to the ground, right?
That's a great way to put it. They are incredibly complex. High pressure, high temperature, thousands of moving parts. If you screw up the engineering on a gas turbine, or if the global supply chain for a specific nickel alloy breaks down, your costs can balloon by hundreds of millions of dollars in a flash.
And we've seen this happen before.
We have seen massive, respected engineering firms, giants like Fluor or Granite, nearly go bankrupt because they took on too much fixed price risk on these complex mega projects.
So Quanta looked at this 3-gigawatt monster of a project and said, we want the work, but we absolutely do not want that kind of risk.
Exactly. The management team, and specifically the CEO, Duke Austin, has been incredibly disciplined about this. Their public statements are very clear. They said, in essence, we are the best in the world at building transmission lines. We are the best at substations. We have the best craft labor. We will do that.
Right.
But we are not taking the fixed price engineering and procurement risk on the gas turbines themselves.
So that's where the joint venture partner Zachary comes in.
That is precisely where Zachary comes in. Zachary Group is a specialist. They've built over 100 of these gas-fired facilities. They understand the turbine engineering risk inside and out, so the JV allows for a very clear division of labor.
Quanta stays in its lane.
Perfectly put. Zachary handles the complex engineering, the procurement, and the commissioning of the gas turbines. Quanta provides the field-level leadership, their massive craft workforce, and they handle everything else, the transmission lines connecting to the grid, the substations, and the battery storage component of the project.
That is it's incredibly smart. It's the definition of risk defined.
That is the catchphrase they use over and over. They get all the upside of participating in a multi-billion-dollar project that's driven by the AI boom, without betting the entire company on the price of steel or a potential turbine design flaw.
There is another detail about this project that I found really surprising, almost counterintuitive. You'd think that a massive data center sucking up 3 gigawatts of power would be a huge negative for the local residents, driving up electricity rates, straining the grid.
That's the common assumption.
But the sources we have claim this project will actually reduce costs for the local utility ratepayers in Indiana.
It sounds like magic math, doesn't it?
It does. How did that possibly work?
It's actually a pretty simple principle of utility economics. It's all about economies of scale and who pays for the fixed costs. The data center, this new large load customer, is paying for the brand new infrastructure. They're footing the bill for the new generation capacity, the new lines, the new substations.
So they are effectively subsidizing the grid for everyone else in the area.
That's a good way to look at it. Because they are such a massive, consistent 247 customer, their payments cover the vast majority of the fixed costs of that new grid infrastructure. The result is that the cost burden is spread over a much larger base of consumption.
And the net effect for the average person.
The sources project a savings of roughly $7 per month for the average residential ratepayer in that NiSource territory.
That is a fascinating dynamic. It completely flips the narrative that data centers are just parasites on the local grid.
If they're structured correctly, they can be the anchor tenants that pay for the grid modernization that everyone else benefits from. But again, structured correctly is the key phrase. And Quanta is at the center of that structuring.
Okay, so we've covered the consumption side with DSI inside the data center walls. We've covered the generation side with the NiSource project and the brilliant risk management there. Now I want to talk about the piece that connects them, the supply chain.
This, to me, is the part of the story that really blew my mind. It's the boldest move they've made.
We're talking about the AEP partnership, American Electric Power.
Yes. But before we can even talk about the deal itself, we have to talk about the problem they're solving. The global supply chain for critical high-voltage grid components is completely and utterly broken.
How broken is broken? Give me an example.
Okay, if you are a utility today and you want to order a new extra high-voltage transformer, we're talking about the big car-sized ones that sit in substations and step down the power for local distribution, you are looking at a lead time of 3 to 4 years.
4 years. So if I get approval to start building a data center today, I can have the building itself finished in maybe 18 months, but I can't actually turn it on until 2030.
That is the new reality.
Yeah.
The primary manufacturers,
Mm.
companies like Siemens, Hitachi, a few others, are completely sold out. Their factory capacity is booked for years. And you cannot build the electron economy, you cannot power the AI revolution if you can't get the parts.
It's the ultimate bottleneck.
It is. So Quanta did something that service companies essentially never do. They decided to become a manufacturer.
It seems like a radical pivot.
It is. Quanta signed what they call a Development Services Agreement with AEP. Now, AEP is the largest operator of 765 kilovolt transmission lines in the U.S. These are the absolute superhighways of the electric grid. They have a $72 billion capital plan for 2026 to 2030. They need to build, and they need to build fast.
And they can't get the transformers.
They can't, so Quanta's stepping up to make the parts for them.
How much are they investing in this?
Quanta is investing between $500 million and $700 million to expand domestic manufacturing capacity for these extra high-voltage transformers and for high-voltage circuit breakers.
I want to pause on that number. $500 million, maybe more. That is a serious, serious bet.
It's a massive bet, and it's a statement. They are vertically integrating their supply chain. They are taking matters into their own hands and bypassing the global bottleneck. They are essentially saying to AEP and to the entire market, if you hire us to build your grid, we guarantee the parts will show up because we are the ones making them.
That goes right back to that execution certainty concept we talked about.
It creates a completely closed loop. Imagine you're the CEO of AEP. You have two bids in front of you. One is from a contractor who says, I can build your project, but I'm on a waiting list for a transformer from Korea that might arrive sometime in 2029. The other bid is from Quanta, who says, we have the transformer on our own truck, and it'll be on site in Q3 of next year.
You hire Quanta every single time, even if their bid is higher.
Especially if their bid is higher. Because the cost of delay for a multi-billion-dollar utility project or for a hyperscale data center that's sitting dark is astronomical. It's tens of millions of dollars a month.
And this manufacturing capacity is primarily to serve the AEP footprint, right?
Initially, yes. The primary goal is to serve AEP's huge 11-state territory. But it also gives them the capacity to serve the surrounding markets. And crucially, it's designed to directly support that massive data center load growth we talked about. You can't hook up a gigawatt-scale data center without these specific transformers. Quanta is solving the hardest, most time-consuming part of the entire equation.
It's incredibly bold. It really turns them from a construction firm into a true industrial conglomerate.
And it creates a moat that is almost impossible for a competitor to cross. You can go out and buy a new bucket truck, you can try to hire some electricians. You cannot easily replicate a $700 million transformer manufacturing facility and a decade-long strategic partnership with the largest utility in the United States.
Speaking of moats, we really need to pivot to the financials. Because all of these brilliant strategic moves, the DSI acquisition, the NiSource JV, this manufacturing investment, they're showing up in the numbers in a big way.
2025 was a record breaker across the board. Let's just look at the top-line revenue. For the full year 2025, it hit $28.48 billion. That's up over 20%, 20.3% year over year.
And was that all just from buying other companies, or was there real organic growth in the core business?
That's a great question. There was very real organic growth, about 8.5%. So the core business is growing healthily even without the acquisitions. But the profitability is what really stands out to me.
Go on.
Adjusted EBITDA reached $2.8 billion. And adjusted EPS, earnings per share, grew nearly 20% to $10.75.
Those are tech stock growth numbers. Those are not the numbers you expect from a company that operates in the utility contractor space.
And the guidance for 2026 implies they are going to do it all over again. They're guiding for revenue to be somewhere between $33.25 billion and $33.75 billion.
So that's another $5 billion jump in revenue in 1 year.
It is. And they are targeting an EPS of roughly $13. So that's another 20% growth on the bottom line. This company is a compounder, plain and simple.
But the number that I think matters the most, the one that really underscores that certainty argument, has to be the backlog.
The backlog is the crystal ball. It tells you exactly what the future looks like because the work is already locked in. Quanta ended 2025 with a total backlog of $44 billion.
$44 billion. That is significantly more than a full year's revenue already sitting in the bank, signed, sealed, and just waiting to be executed.
It provides incredible visibility for investors. In a volatile market, knowing you have $44 billion of committed work is a massive, massive safety net.
But with a story this good, we have to address the valuation because the market knows this story, right? This stock isn't a secret. It isn't cheap.
No, it is absolutely not a value stock in the traditional sense. It is trading at a premium multiple. You're looking at a PE ratio around 78. EV to EBITDA is around 34. You are paying a steep price for this kind of quality and growth.
A PE of 78 for what many people still see as a construction company. That sounds terrifying.
It would be if they were just a construction company. But the analysts who cover this closely, like the team at Seaport Global who named it a top pick for 2026, they argue that you are paying the price of entry for the moat. You are paying for the certainty. You are paying for the unique exposure.
What do you mean by unique exposure?
There is no other single company that gives you this specific, concentrated exposure to the three biggest secular trends of our time: the AI build-out, grid modernization, and the reshoring of American manufacturing.
So you're paying up for quality and for a one-of-a-kind asset.
And for scarcity. Who else are you going to buy? There really isn't a direct competitor with this scale, this integration, and this level of execution.
But there is one more piece of this puzzle, one more part of the moat that we haven't touched on yet, and I think it might be the most important one of all. We've talked about the tech, the contracts, the factories, but none of this happens without people.
The workforce alpha.
Talk to me about the labor situation, because every industry I look at, I see help wanted signs. The skilled trades are supposedly dying out.
That is the macro headwind for the entire country. The average age of a skilled electrician or a power lineman is high. People are retiring faster than young people are entering the trades. It's a huge problem. But Quanta has managed to flip this crisis into a competitive advantage.
How have they done that?
Well, first, just by sheer scale. They have the largest craft skilled team in America. As of the last report, approximately 69,500 employees.
Nearly 70,000 people. That is the size of a decent-sized American city.
It is. But the key isn't just the raw number. It's the concept that management calls a fungible workforce.
Fungible, that's an economics term. What does it mean in the world of hard hats and steel-toed boots?
It means interchangeable, adaptable. Let's say the utility-scale solar market cools down for a quarter because interest rates ticked up. A smaller, specialized solar contractor would have to lay those skilled workers off.
Right. They'd be out of a job.
But Quanta takes those same skilled workers and seamlessly moves them. Okay, no solar work this month in Arizona. We're moving your crew to Indiana to work on the NiSource gas pipeline. Or, we need you in Ohio to help the DSI team with a data center build.
So they keep their labor utilization incredibly high. They don't have skilled people sitting on the bench.
Exactly. And because they can offer steady year-round work across a diverse set of sectors, they attract and retain the best talent in the industry. But here's the most important part. They aren't just hiring people. They're building their own workforce from scratch.
You mean through training programs?
I mean, through full-blown educational institutions. They own proprietary training colleges, with the most famous one being Northwest Lyman College. They are not waiting for the market to provide them with skilled workers. They are manufacturing workers, just like they're now manufacturing transformers.
And the numbers on that are pretty impressive. The notes say they are organically adding 6,000 new workers annually through these programs.
6,000 a year. Think about the power of that. In a severely labor-constrained market, having the bodies, having the actual skilled hands to do the work is the ultimate constraint on growth. You can have a $44 billion backlog, you can have all the engineering drawings, you can even have the transformers, but if you don't have a qualified lineman to climb the pole and connect the wire, that project creates zero revenue.
So their training program is arguably their single most important strategic asset.
I would argue that yes. It is the absolute foundation upon which everything else is built. It is their workforce alpha.
Okay, we have painted a very, very rosy picture here. Vertical integration, massive backlog, huge AI tailwinds, a workforce moat. But we need to be objective. What keeps the CEO, Duke Austin, up at night? What are the real risks to this story?
There are definitely real risks. The most headline-grabbing one at the moment is Puerto Rico.
LUMA Energy.
Right. Quanta is part of the consortium, LUMA Energy, that took over the operation and maintenance of Puerto Rico's beleaguered power grid. And to put it mildly, it has been a struggle.
I've seen the news reports. Chronic power outages, public protests, a lot of political anger.
There's active litigation from the Puerto Rican government that is seeking to cancel the contract entirely. It has become a political football, it is an operational headache, and it's a reputational challenge.
Could a situation like that actually tank the company?
It's highly unlikely. You have to remember, Quanta is a nearly $30 billion company. The Puerto Rico contract is significant, but it's one contract in one specific and very challenging region. If they were to lose that contract, it would be a hit to the stock's sentiment for sure. But it's not an existential threat.
What about that labor shortage we just talked about? You framed it as an advantage, but is it also a risk, even for them?
Paradoxically, yes, it is. Even with their training programs graduating 6,000 new workers a year, the demand for their services is so high that labor scarcity acts as a governor on their growth.
A governor, like on an engine, to keep it from revving too high.
That's the perfect analogy. Quanta might want to grow revenue by 40% next year. The demand from data centers and utilities is certainly there. But they physically might not be able to find enough qualified project managers and skilled craftspeople to execute all that work safely and effectively. So the labor shortage, in a way, caps their own upside potential.
And then, of course, you have the standard macro risks. Trade policy.
Always a concern. If new tariffs get slapped on steel or aluminum, or if global trade wars disrupt the flow of components that they don't manufacture themselves, that hurts their margins. Inflation is another big one. If wages for skilled labor skyrocket, their margins get squeezed, unless they can pass those costs on to their customers.
But it seems like they are mitigating a lot of that with these cost-plus contracts and the JV structures, right?
They are. They've become very sophisticated in shifting that commodity price risk to the client wherever possible. But it's still a risk you have to monitor.
Despite those risks, though, the project pipeline seems to be just overflowing. I see notes here about Alaska LNG.
That's another potential mega project. Quanta's pipeline subsidiary, Price Gregory, has received a conditional award for Phase 1 of that project. That is a 739-mile natural gas pipeline.
739 miles. Just the scale of these projects is hard to grasp.
And then there's the LEDWP project in Los Angeles. That's a $1 billion-plus transmission line project that's supposed to start in 2026. The point is, the diversity of the projects across different energy sectors protects them. If data centers slow down for some reason, they have LNG. If LNG gets delayed, they have utility grid modernization.
Portfolio protected.
Exactly.
So let's try to land this plane. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've gone from the humble bucket truck on the side of the road all the way to the 800-volt server rack inside a hyperscale data center.
We certainly have.
If you had to summarize the new Quanta to someone who hasn't listened to the last hour of this deep dive, what is the elevator pitch?
I would say this. Quanta Services has fundamentally evolved from a cyclical utility contractor into a premier technology and infrastructure platform. They have vertically integrated by manufacturing their own supply chain to guarantee execution. They have moved inside the building with the Dynamic Systems acquisition to capture the high-margin AI infrastructure work. And they have systematically de-risked their portfolio by refusing to take on bad, fixed-price contracts on the most complex projects like NiSource.
And they have the army of skilled workers to actually build it all.
They have the Army, 69,500 strong and growing every year.
You know, my final takeaway is this. We talk a lot about the AI revolution. We talk about the chips from NVIDIA, the software, the large language models. But all of that is digital. It feels abstract. It feels weightless.
But it isn't weightless at all. It's incredibly heavy.
It's incredibly heavy. It requires millions of tons of steel, copper, and concrete, and it's powered by billions and billions of electrons. And if the demand for AI grows exponentially, which all signs suggest it is, but the physical grid can only grow linearly, well, you have a math problem.
You have a bottleneck.
And the company that controls the connection between that exponential demand and that linear supply, the one who manufactures the transformers, who builds the high voltage lines, who installs the complex cooling systems, that entity holds all the cards.
They absolutely do.
Quanta isn't just building the grid anymore. They are effectively becoming the gatekeeper of the AI revolution's power supply. If Microsoft or Google or Meta wants to turn on their next-generation supercomputer, they have to go through Quanta first.
That is an incredibly powerful and profitable position to be in for the next decade.
It certainly is. Well, this has been a fascinating look at the plumbing of the future.
It's always fun to look under the hood at the things that make the modern world work.
Risk defined.
Portfolio protected.